It's mainly to do with performing at my best in all areas of my life. And when it comes to health and well-being, I'm fascinated with that side of it. So I will share all that I learned, because I think we can all resonate with feeling exhausted, burnt out, and wondering, what can we tweak in our life so we can be at our best? You can email the show aliveandkicking@newstalk.com. But let's look then at this brain and eye health. Professor John Nolan of the Nutrition Research Centre in Waterford has been on the show a couple of times talking about supplements, calling for certification in the industry, and later to talk about Remind and his research around macular or sight degeneration, brain health and carotenoids, which can be found in colourful food. When he asked if I'd be interested in testing my own eye and brain health, I jumped at the chance. So I have been working with him and his colleague, Dr. Marina Green, since January this year. And John joins me in studio now. John, you're very welcome.
Claire, it's a pleasure, as always.
And can you tell us a little bit, because I kind of put it into very much layman's terms, about your research and carotenoids and brain and macular degeneration?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose we have the value now of over 20 years of work with the area of carotenoid nutrition. So what that basically means is that from the healthy foods that we eat, the plant-based foods, any of those foods that have colour have these really important nutrients called carotenoids. And there's about 700 carotenoids in nature. So when you look at kind of birds' feathers, when you look at colour on fish skin, when you look at colours of peppers, these are all because of these natural pigments, if you like. They're pigments. So they're not vitamins, they're not minerals, they're just pigments that live in nature. We consume about 50 of those. And your listeners may be familiar with a carotenoid like beta-carotene, for example, which is an essential carotenoid, lycopene, and all of these carotenoids have their interest for human health because they do different things for us, and we might come to that later. What was really remarkable in the early stages of our study, that when we look at the eye and now the brain, we see that there's a concentration and a selection of specific carotenoids. And these carotenoids are lutein, zeaxanthin, and a very special carotenoid called mesozeaxanthin. So they're complicated names, but basically they're the type of carotenoid pigments that you'd see in foods like spinach or peppers or egg yolk would be, or corn-related products. Now, so when a human consumes these plant-based foods, he or she hopefully will digest them, they'll become bioavailable, bioaccessible. They'll go into what I call the taxi system, which is the blood system. And the blood system will deliver these to the target tissues in the body where they are working. Carotenoids, and our early interest in carotenoids was for a disease called age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in the Western world. Over 86,000 people at last count in Ireland are registered with macular degeneration. And people with macular degeneration lose their central vision, their colour vision.
And you were saying that can be important as you age. We often hear about falls and we think it's to do with, becoming a little more frail, perhaps, which I suppose adds to it, and a little less strong. But it's actually not being able to tell the difference between the colours. So the pavement and the road can be confusing.
It's something called contrast. So contrast sensitivity is a measure in vision science that we use because it's a very sensitive measure to performance and function of vision. So exactly to your point, if you're walking on the sidewalk or on the path, knowing where that ends and starts, maybe the difference between an elderly person falling or not, and all of these things are highly linked. Going back to the carotenoids, the whole point of having them is that they will protect the tissues that we need to enhance our vision, like contrast, and protect our vision from degenerating and protect us from developing diseases like macular degeneration. And they do that quite simply because they're like antioxidants, so like sunscreen inside our body. So in the eye, imagine we concentrate at the tissue, the retina, which is like the film of the camera, the piece of the camera that we need, the piece of the eye that we need to work for us to have vision. These nutrients are concentrated there and they work there to kind of keep away the badness, to keep away what we call the free radicals, the oxidative stress damage, and to optimise the use of light in our eye. The net result being, as you rightly put, that it has an impact on real-time vision-related quality of life, which is important for you and me, Claire, but it's also important and becomes more important, of course, as we get older.
and to our brain health. And not to speed up your 20 years of long, hard research, but you also found that brain degeneration is also linked to decline in carotenoids in our system. So we hear it time and time again, what we eat and how we eat is truly important, but your research has really fed into that, if you'll excuse the pun.
Yeah, I suppose we evolved from our work demonstrating that we can enhance vision in macular degeneration in a very real way too. Actually, that's important for general society, and it's been now used in sports performance, for example. But you're absolutely right. As part of our studies as far back as 2011, when we started our European project, the CREST project, we started to look at kind of potentially other applications for carotenoids. And we identified that the carotenoids were not just in the retina, but they were also in the brain. And then the question became, well, what are they doing there? Is lutein and zeaxanthin important for brain health also? And there was a major study done actually as part of the TILDA project here in Ireland with Professor Roseanne Kenny and her team. We collaborated on a project there, and we identified that actually from over 5,000 people in Ireland, when you look at their carotenoid score, which we were able to measure, and when you look at their cognitive ability, so their memory, their attention, their reaction time, we saw a striking relationship between the participants in that trial who had high carotenoid score and their cognitive functions, their cognitive abilities. So that's what we call cross-sectional data. And that was kind of the start of this research into that whole brain area. And then we were the first in the world soon after that to work with patients with Alzheimer's disease. So working with my colleague, Professor Rihanna Mulcahy, Prof in Waterford, University Hospital Waterford, we started to work carefully to try and profile carotenoid scores in patients with Alzheimer's disease. And remarkably, we saw that they were so deficient in these particular nutrients. Now, that could be because, as you know well, with Alzheimer's, with the disease itself, dietary patterns change and food consumption change. So it may have just simply been that they weren't eating foods containing any of these carotenoids, and hence the low score. But we had to go test that. And one way we demonstrated that was when we were able to give them the carotenoids in supplement form, the response was fantastic in terms of being able to up their carotenoid scores throughout their body, that the blood system, their eye, and that's an indicator, of course, of the brain concentration, because it's highly correlated. So in other words, if you've high carotenoid in your eye, it means you've high carotenoid in your brain. So we have a real-time biomarker that we can measure. And
I just think it takes it a step on, because all we ever hear is eat your 5 a day, and this just takes it to a new level. It's telling you what those 5 should look like and why. And something you said that really blew my mind. Now, don't say which company it is, but we have to be so careful where we're taking our nutritional advice from. You mentioned the colour yellow and the egg yolk.
Yeah.
And eggs got a really bad rap for being bad for our cholesterol, but that was actually something that was sent out by a cereal company to stop people eating eggs at breakfast time. Eggs are
superfood. And people, we need to understand cholesterol itself. Cholesterol, the word cholesterol, the initial reaction is, oh, it's bad. Cholesterol is essential. We need cholesterol, but we want more of the good cholesterol. And eggs provide good cholesterol. I did a study with eggs actually in Waterford, and we demonstrated that by taking 2 eggs a day over an 8-week period, we significantly increased cholesterol levels in those participants. But it was the very good cholesterol, and it had the effect on the HDL in the system. So the bad cholesterols didn't increase. In fact, they decreased. And the value of having foods like eggs is that not only you're getting your proteins and everything that go with that, you're getting highly bioavailable type of carotenoids. So there's one thing, and we spoke before about, a salad, for example, that doesn't have oils or dressings. The ability of us as humans to break down those salads and take out the goodness and get those nutrients, carotenoids in this case, delivered to the target tissue is very limited if it's not bioavailable. But eggs are highly bioavailable because of the fats in the egg. So a perfect delivery system for high quality nutrition.
And a whole food that's pretty much easy enough to cook. I know people say I can't boil an egg, but Marina, Dr. Marina Green, she came to do her PhD with you from Mexico, and she ended up staying. She fell in love with Waterford and a man there, and the work you're doing, obviously, and she's highly involved. But Mexican people do really well in these tests, don't they? Is that because of the amount of corn they eat? There's a lot of colour in a Mexican diet.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Actually, we did a study in a place in Mexico called Morelos, just outside of Mexico City. But the socioeconomic environment there is very low in terms of income and salaries and so on, and access to food. So they basically get eggs and corn to survive. And so when we did our assessment of diet, and in theory we were looking at the dietary pattern in Ireland versus a dietary pattern in Mexico. And in theory, the Irish adult should be consuming significantly more carotenoids because we have access to more of those type of foods. But the Mexican blood levels of carotenoids that we measured were more than double that of the Irish population.
Wow.
It was just a phenomenal finding.
So have a fajita night, get a few corn tortillas, get a guacamole on the go, and a bit of coriander. I couldn't get cilantro out of my head. I don't know why I went American with it there, but yeah, throw it all in and mix it all up. So look, let's get to my tests then. I've said at the start of the show, I've become a bit... At the start of the year, I said, I really want to know, am I performing at my best? And I seem to have attracted all these different tests and testing into my life. And yours was a really interesting one. So we started 6 months ago, but probably a bit more now. And I was fascinated by the technology you had. So to test the amount of carotenoids in my system, you were able to do a skin test using my fingerprint, essentially, and look into my eye.
Yeah, so... The first thing I'll say to you actually is a successful experiment requires compliance to the study, in this case to the intervention. So I'd like to say well done to you, and I think there's a message in that. And what I mean is, like, I always compare it to like joining the fitness centre in January, which is a common phenomena here in Ireland. We all join the fitness centre, but those who kind of stay at it and comply to the exercise and the healthy life plan get great results, but it takes time and commitment. So like a research study requires that too, right? And you did that, and you're right. So when you came down to Marina and I and the team in Waterford, we tried to kind of take sections out of what would have been normally used in a classic full-blown experiment that we'd work with patients with Alzheimer's or patients with macular degeneration or even the healthy population. So in your case, you'll remember Marina profiled your diet, and very straight away we saw that actually like your behaviour with food was very, very good, and on the plus side of what would be normal in terms of the amount of fruits and vegetables that you would eat. So we profiled that, and in a typical study we would map that and monitor that for any change over the duration of the study.
Yeah, and just to let people know, that meant Marina had a list of veg and foods, and she'd say, how often would you eat corn? How often would you eat spinach? How often? And I had to just kind of think in a week, how often would I? But I mean, look, I have a lean in health and wellness. That's why I'm sitting here and doing this radio show. Yeah. And I do try and focus on cooking as many things as I can myself, as opposed to taking it out of a packet. I do focus on adding veg and fruit where I can to my diet, but I certainly don't live like a monk, and I get a lot of joy out of food, and it's not something I think about on a constant basis. So I think that's important to put out there, because I think when you look at athletes, sometimes you're like, well, they're very different to someone like me. I'm a busy person, I'm a parent, I'm juggling a lot. I literally do my best most of the time, not all of the time. So I'm interested to see where I'm at on the scale.
Yeah, I think as good as and the compliments you've given you with your diet, you're also very normal. I think that's the point, and I think that's
average.
Nice. Yeah, we say better than average. But and so we're going to show you some of your blood results now. But we did blood analysis, right? So how did we do that? We took the blood sample, and that went to the laboratory with Alfonso and Tommy, and they will have put that through very sophisticated kind of what we call HPLC. In other words, we were going to quantify how much of these carotenoids, lutein, zeaxanthin and mesozeaxanthin, you were carrying around in your taxi system, in your blood system. And you'll also remember we did measures in your skin, and we did measures in your eye, in the target tissue at the macula, and we also did measures around function. So the research question for you, Claire, was even with someone so healthy to begin with, if we were to change that with a supplement intervention, could we change these important parameters related to your health? So the first thing we can look at here, and let me see, can I show you? But this is this is a normative database of lutein in blood. This is from an Irish sample, and you can see here, there's a score here of 0.194 micromoles per litre. So that would be normal, but quite low. When we look at you, before you went on the supplement, you were more than double that, 0.442. So here you can see where normal is, and you're kind of double normal to begin with. Okay, so
wow.
Isn't that interesting? Are you surprised by that?
Yeah, I am actually. I am. I mean, I would concentrate on eating well, like I said, but it's not anything over the top.
But this tells us something else. This tells us, and not to be too negative, but how poor we are doing in general society. Because these carotenoid scores are absolute indicators of, good nutrition and everything that's connected to that. So they're an indicator of many other type of nutrients. So
yeah, but I say it all the time, it's busy lifestyle. If you're starting off the day with a bowl of cereal, then you're grabbing a sandwich and a coffee at lunch, leaving the office or, on the go, whatever your job is, and then you're coming home and you're throwing something into the oven that's a ready meal. Like, there's not a lot of colour there. There's not a lot of diversity there. And I completely understand why somebody would do that. But that's why it's important to give them the knowledge and information on the impact that will have in the long term.
Absolutely. And the other problem we have, and even if you go out today and your listeners go out today and try, and they should try, and we all should try, because good nutrition is the pillar of good health, right? Let's not get away from that. But honestly, Claire, the amount we're getting is less and less and less. It's devolving. The foods we're consuming are devolving in these active micronutrients because, there's some fantastic farming. We had this discussion before, but, when you pick a crop and isolate it and, try and make that crop overgrow because we need to supply it, the plant itself will underproduce the goodness in the plant.
Yeah. And we can see, you can see on the labels where your veg is flying in from. And so, yeah, we do get it. So over the 6 months, I did supplement.
Yeah.
Look, as you say, and that's what I always like about you, this isn't necessarily a walking ad for the supplement. It's nutrition first. But what were my results 6 months later?
There you go. Fantastic. You can see here that you're over double, over 120% improvement in your lutein. So you've taken it to just a super level. So then the question becomes, so this is lutein, right? We look at the zeaxanthin now in a second, because you would get zeaxanthin from different foods, and egg yolk would be a very good source of zeaxanthin. But you've doubled just in 6 months the amount of these protective micronutrients in your system that are going to be delivered to your eye and to your brain just by being on that supplement for 6 months. And remember, you didn't stop your diet or change your diet. That was stable throughout the 6 months that we worked with you. So we were even surprised to see the level that this went to from someone who had a very good starting point.
Wow.
Yeah. So looking at zeaxanthin again, same story. The normative score again, this is 0.073 micromoles per litre. So this is what we're measuring in the blood. You're coming out at 0.2. So again, more than double to begin with. And following now, there's less zeaxanthin in the supplement, but you can see here a fantastic response again, maybe a 60% improvement in your total zeaxanthin scores in your blood system. So, again, really, really pleased with that. And so you would expect the blood, in science we say the half-life, which is basically connected to the length of time it will take to get a system saturated and optimized when you optimize the target intervention. Blood should increase pretty quickly. It has to go into your stomach. From the supplement, it has to be absorbed. We create what's called a micelle, which is basically like a delivery package. I call it Pac-Man. And it goes on its journey in through the lymph system, the blood system, and it's available then for delivery, right? But a real nice new thing to discuss is that we also now can measure these nutrients in the skin, because the skin is a tissue that accumulates these carotenoids. And remember I said about the antioxidant effects, so they're beneficial in the skin as well. So we can measure that. You'll remember we measured it on the system that we have using the life meter. And here you can see your starting point is at about 400, and just in 6 months we got you up to nearly 600.
And will that continue to climb, or is there a time where it kind of plateaus?
It'll plateau in the skin. You're certainly not at your plateau at 6 months. I think I hit my plateau at about 12 months in my skin carotenoid score. And but it's great. The nice thing about the skin is, like, you'll remember the invasiveness of coming and getting your blood taken and the cost of getting that done in the lab. That's not really usable and feasible, across society. But now we have technology. I have it here. You can see the life meter, which is a system that you simply just put your hand on, your finger on, and we can measure the carotenoids in your skin. And Marina did that at the baseline for you and before you went on your supplement, and you can see the improvement there.
And that's why you're calling for certification in supplements, because there are so many supplements on so many shelves, but people need to be really careful what they're taking and why they're taking it.
Absolutely. I mean, the certification piece around supplements is something that I have a passion for. It's something that's supported at our university now with Supplement Certified. And look, at one level, people may say, well, he just wants to talk about the supplement that he studied and that the university has licensed out, and because that's where that conflict of interest is. It's with the university. It's not with me personally. But that's a good thing, because it means that we know what we've done. But what we learned along that way is that when you look at kind of the other supplements that are out there, and some of them might be more expensive, some of them might be much cheaper. If you don't know that they're stable, well, then the patients or the general population can't benefit from having them. But B, you have to know that they're available and bioavailable. We spoke about Marina today. Her whole PhD was on the bioavailability of these carotenoids. So when you actually take a supplement, do you get a response? So knowing what's in the supplement is key. And the challenge with these really special nutrients, Clare, is, if they're not formulated correctly, they will oxidize. And that's why when I'm giving my lecture about this now, I'm unapologetic in saying that the science begins at the source. So when it's farmed from the marigolds in Mexico, these beautiful flowers, that's where this begins. They come from the marigolds, and they have to be extracted from the marigold petals, these lutein and zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin carotenoids. And then they have to go to a factory, basically, where they get encapsulated into a capsule. And if it's not managed safely throughout that process, by the time it gets into the pharmacy or into the doctor's office, you could have what I call a smartie, no carotenoids. And we have to protect against that. So
yeah, and especially when we're talking about long-term health, we're living longer, but what sort of quality of life are we having? And something I always love to say is food is medicine, and nutrition is so, so important. So look, thank you. It was a real privilege for me to get access to information like this about myself. But again, I just want to share, I just focus on, eating well to the best of my ability. And your research shows that can really pay off. So I think it's a really good message to put out there. Professor John Nolan, where can people find out more?
So people can, on my website, profjohnnolan.com, all the published studies are there.